Everybody, welcome back. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about part one of organics, and there's a reason why I saved part one for a little bit later, and it's because it's a longer lecture, and I tend to want to get people drawing first, and then come back and remind them of a couple things that they're seeing in their observation, and then also part one is a lot to understand about nature and how nature works, and there's quite a bit of things to talk about. So, as we begin, let's start off here. First, let's talk about most important thing: know your subject matter. So, what I mean by that is, if you're working on, and one of the things that separates out environments and organic drawing, and this is my opinion, but I think it's right because I'm always right. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think it's important because there's some things you can get away with in environment or interior sketchings, but when it comes to organic sketching, there's some things you have to know. For example, what is the place? What's the time period, country of origin? What's the climate? There are different plant species all over the world. There are some plant species that are found in sun in jungles. There are some that are found on wet climates, dry climates. So a huge part of designing sometimes and drawing is this term here: know your subject matter, know the detail range. You can't. Here's the thing that I see that students do all the time is they just start drawing and they're drawing with what's coming out of their head, and there's a couple problems with that. Number one is that you might have a limited understanding of the subject matter. Number two, your visual shape language is not as experienced, and your background in understanding how to draw plants or organics or trees or root systems, that is another major issue right there. So if you don't have a lot of experience in that subject matter, you have to get engulfed inside it, and you have to learn about it, and you have to figure out what are some differences, and then how do you go from there. So what I thought I'd do is I'm going to show you a really quick, simple approach to drawing, but then also a huge part of this lecture is going to be all about understanding nature itself and how it affects us in terms of pattern, in terms of flow, in terms of gradation, and some other areas. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's start off talking about what we're seeing when we're looking out. Okay, so I happen to have some of these wonderful pictures here from some of their organics locally to us. I just took my drawing class out the other day. I've had a variety of these pictures before. This is from the Fullerton Arboretum, and it's actually a whole entire grouping of wonderful plant life with a variety of different species and styles. And one of the cool things about California is looking at where we are on a map in terms of the latitude and longitude. There's lots of different plant lives that can grow here if properly watered, even though California is a desert. But if there's shade and there's water, we're going to be okay. Okay, so what I wanted to do is just sort of go through some of these images and talk about things that I noticed, or things that peak up to me, and then after that I thought I'd sketch for a little bit, and then I thought I'd finish the rest of the lecture out. So the reason why I took this picture right here is what I'm looking for is separation of different plant life amongst each other. And one of the first things that I notice in here is hold on, let me grab my pen, is looking at how much of a difference it is between this leaf structure, this plant here, and then over here, this section here, that's another type of plant life that if you were to blow it up really close, you'll see it has these really small, like little ends on each one of the leaves like that. And then it comes to a point and it's sort of in a general shape, right? So that's pretty cool to me. Also, there's in the back here, there's a different type of tree there. So and then of course right over here to the left, you have another type. So little photos like this provides me little bits of information that help guide me along part of my journey and figure out what plants look like. Now, this one was really cool. So what I want to start doing is I'm pointing out a couple things here about these plant lives and these organics. Hopefully these are things that you'll think about. So and not some of these things are things that are common sense, but a lot of times people take them for granted. So here's one thing that's pretty important that you'll notice. Hold on a minute. There. Sorry, I had a little problem there. One of the key things to remember always about plant life is plants tend to grow from a center, and then they radiate outward like so. Okay. Another thing that you're going to notice about plant life is, I know there's probably, if you look up botany in different areas, you'll probably find more of a diverse study for this, but I've noticed that plants tend to keep an upper area. I'm going to call this like it's like an upside down cone of vision right there. Do you see that? It's this weird cone that tends to be an area that always protects the center mass of the plant from sunlight and allows it to have shade. And also, the other purpose of that is to gather water so the water can drop down. And then a lot of times I'll notice these large leaves sort of branch out. And I have a theory on part of that. I think that part of that happens for two reasons. Number one, I think leaves hang downward like that because they're dying and getting old, and then the new leaves are obviously either growing upward out in this direction. That's reason number one. Reason number two is I also think that it might have something to do with nature, and the fact that nature, by putting these leaves down, it keeps animals or bugs or herbivore-based, animals or even small little insects, whatever you want to call it, from coming close to the plant. So it's a way of like creating like a secondary little barrier around part of the plant. Okay. And then I was also reading it, was reading some articles before I did this lecture, looking at some more information about botany and plant life too. And one of the things is that part of plants being more open and growing down means that they're also a mature leaf structure. So that mature leaf structure is being heavily involved in the photosynthesis process. And so that what that means is you're going to have plants that tend to grow and protect themselves with shade, and then they're going to stick out branches and so on to get out and exposed into sunlight. In fact, when you start looking at a lot of plant life, one of the things I look for when I'm looking at plants is where is the coverage of the plant, and in relationship to the coverage, where are the branches going out to, and how are they getting exposed to the sunlight, because you need the sunlight, right? So I think and when it comes to botany, I think you're talking about multiple structures that have to sort of work together, but that's important for me when I'm drawing, because when I'm sketching, it allows me to think about, how far does a tree have to reach, or how far does a plant have to go. So for example, you can see that this photo that I just had up here a minute ago, it was a close-up. That plant right there is a defined close-up, and there it is, it's right here. So because of that tree structure and because of the other top structure, you can see that some of this might be casting out and growing. It could be protective, but it could also be to expose it to sunlight, right? Because if the tree does not have sunlight, that is a massive part of its growth, right? So it's going to need that. So, I don't know, these are little things I think of. So I know it to you, someone out there is like, man, you sure get into a lot of detail for this, but it makes sense because when I draw plants, I come from a background of being and working as an environment designer. I need to think of this stuff. I need to think of where's my light coming from? Where's my shadow side? How are these plants going to be exposed to light? Because I need to make my environment look as real as can be. And look at that. Isn't that a great picture, by the way? Because that shows you what a really cool environment made up of different groupings of plants, how it sort of comes together. Another little thing that I was learned way back in the day, that when you look at, I'm going to see if you can see it right here, but they'll take this tree in the background. That tree ends about right there. Most trees, the upper canopy that comes down is protective shade. This canopy relationship from here to here matches the relationship of the tree roots, okay? 90% of the time there's been a couple occasions where I've seen some different tree structures like in Thailand or Vietnam where that might break off from that, but the majority part of the time, nature is its own engineering system. So you're going to have organic roots that are coming down, and these roots are going to stay within that upper canopy, and it makes sense, right? Because the root structure has to go down like that, and it has to spread out far enough, because if there's wind or anything else, it could create, that tree could fall over. So all of nature has its own protective system, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later here. Okay, but that's something else I'm making you aware of. So what do I know now? I know that plants grow out. So if I were to write these things down, actually, let's do that real quick. So let me turn that layer off. Let's come back here. Let's add a new layer in the beginning. I know number one. I know that with plants and organics, I'm going to call it we have a radiating growth. You know, that they're growing from a center. Okay. The other thing that I know about all my plants, that we're talking about the leaf structures, that they can provide shade and / protection for the plant, and they can also help to spread out to provide part of the photosynthesis. I'm going to put it just photo growth process. Okay. All right. Number 3 that we just talked about is that we talked about the root systems of the plant in versus meaning relationship to the upper canopy. Okay. And then we'll go to number 4 here, which we'll continue on in just a minute here. Okay. So these are important things, because just those 3 things right there, that's the difference to me when I see student work and I could tell they don't know what the heck they're doing, because, you know, they're drawing out of their head and they come down here and they make this root system like super huge and it's bigger than the top of the tree. So it makes the drawing look off. It doesn't quite look right, you know. Even on palm trees, if you take a look at some palm trees have a bulbous root that stays sort of round like this. And then even when the leaves sort of grow out like this, a lot of that root is the responsibility of that root is to hold the tree in a mass wind conditions. So that root system breaks out into like a bunch of like V's sort of all spread out on top of each other. Okay. So to me, that's fascinating, because then when I see palm trees that are doing this in like the Caribbean, and then they're hanging over like this with a bunch of trees, that base here is usually connected with another tree or two, meaning that nature grew these all together from the same root system, and that root system is large enough to automatically balance out the weight of every one of these palms and to bring them all together. Okay, well, that's important stuff. All of this translates into your drawing. Okay, so anyway, this was another pathway. I thought this was pretty cool, because when we were talking about in the second lecture, we're talking a little bit about grouping. Okay, and I really like that grouping in there. And this tree, man, is this tree just not gorgeous? I mean, look at here's another thing. Here, I'm going to jot this down. Okay, trees have a branching system, and that branching system tends to look like muscles and like arms and elbows. Okay, so right there, hold on, we're going to come back to that layer. So if I come back over here and I turn this back on, okay, number 4, we have another key fact down here, is that the tree, okay, branch systems, which are going to be considered into 2 parts. You have 2 types of branching systems. You have the roots, right, which is a branching system, and then we're going to call it the upper. I know there's fancy botany terms of, you know, but I'm just going to call it the upper arms. Okay, but you have these branches and these arms that look like elbows and they look like muscles. And I know, God, I know there's that one student out there is going to be like, well, I have a tree in my backyard and this one doesn't look like this. Okay, there might be a couple exceptions for the rule, but remember, the goal of this lecture is to provide you with 5 or 6 or 4, whatever, key facts that you remember in the back of your brain. So when you go out to draw organics, you are better as an artist at understanding the subject matter that you are drawing. End of story. Okay. All right. So when I come back up here, let's go back to that layer 20. Okay. Look at that detail that's in there. In fact, I should have taken a close-up picture of this. I can zoom in a little bit here and we can see, I mean, look at how cool that plant is. You know, look at how this goes and boom, it like splits off into another one. So this, to me, this is a great example of branching systems where you have one massive root that's down here. And let me add another layer on this so I don't draw on this. We have one massive root down there, right? And then look at this. Boom, you go off, then there's a split. Then that goes, splits into 2. And then that goes, splits into 3. See that? And it goes again. Split, 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 split. So you get all these splints that are happening. That's a branching system. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've seen sketches from students that are drawing trees out of their head, and I can look at it and I go, did you look at reference for that tree? They're all, no. Well, usually what I tell them is, did you draw that out of their head? They're like, yeah. And they're like, how do you know? And I'm like, Because you don't have a branching system that makes sense. That's not how nature works. The other thing too is, here's the other thing I noticed. Look at how that feels like a bicep. You see that? Look at how that's like the bicep right there, you know? And look at it. I mean, that looks like part of the deltoid coming in. That looks like part of the tricep coming in there. Okay? This looks part of a forearm here that comes over to like a hand in there. I mean, look at that. Trees, if you don't think nature is going to mimic all of nature and us being on this planet in human form, we're part of nature. Sorry, I don't care what background or religion or whatever you might be. We're all connected in somehow. And I'll get to that in a little bit. In another 5 or 10 minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about how all these patterns of nature and everything are completely connected together. Anyway, that's just really awesome, right? Looking at that. And then look at that same plant. Look at that root structure. Dude, you're telling me that's not awesome? Look at how that thing goes down. And this is all one tree. So you have all these different roots coming in together, and look at how they split off. Look at how they go into the ground and then they go down. I mean, that's just absolutely incredible to be able to bounce back and forth between that and looking at that. So once again, I come back to this basics, you know. I tell students, know your subject matter. Know what it is you're drawing. Understand it. Go out, look at it, you know. Pay attention to it. Observe it. Ask yourself questions. Try to figure out what's taking place, you know. Okay? All right. And then let's go over here. So now here's something else that I noticed in this. This is just a really nice palm. And one thing that caught my eye that I want to point out from a sketching point of view, which I'll probably go back and I was going to do some sketch and some rendering a little bit later on, finish the part 3 of the demo for organics. But one thing I notice about this is all the curves of the leaves. Do you see that? So we talked about that radiation point. And so here it is again. You'll notice how this coming out from a center mass here is boom, that's come towards us, like flopped over. So when I do my little drawing demo in a minute, what I like to do is I like to think of these leaves. I don't think of the detail. I think of the large shape. In this right now, the large shape of this is like a spoon. So a spoon looks like this, right? And then a spoon has a rounded tip. This rounded tip right here, to me, represents this curving in here, all this detail that's right in there, right? But when I go to draw that, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to get caught into all these little details. The first thing that's going to be in my sketch is going to be this curved shape, right? And then the spoon shape. And then I could figure out then, if that shape's curving towards me, what that large spoon feels like with a dedicated center line. And then I could get a feel of how that comes back into the radiating center, right? So we'll cover that in a minute once I finish this section, okay? But it's an important thing to think about, okay? In all of drawing, break everything down to its simplest shape, simplest form, and read that to go forward. Okay, that was another cool palm, minus the stupid cone in there. For some reason they had a cone in there, but I really liked, look at that curve. See that gestural curve in there? Thought that was pretty cool. And then look at this. So something else I'm going to mention. Here's another magic word for you to think about, okay? Something else students screw up all the time. So if we have this curve, we're going to have natural swaying organics, right? Of course, it's a tree. Well, not everything grows straight. So a lot of times to make a good organic drawing, it's nice to have things on curves and off angles. So what I'm going to do, I just mentioned something there. So hold on a minute. Let me come back here. I'm going to scroll back, turn on my other page here. Oops. Helps if I turn that layer off. That's layer 26. So down here on our little notes section, okay, make a little note to myself right here. So topic number 5, let's talk about non-symmetrical trees. So having trees that have gesture. That's a, excuse me. Oops. How did I do that? Hold on. Trees that have a gesture. I can't spell today. I can't ever spell. That have a gesture to them, right? So they're not always perfectly straight. So that's one of my major, rules when we talk about design. That's bad. And that's a 90-degree angle, folks. So having tons of 90-degree angles. I've seen pine trees, palm trees, all kinds of trees. Almost one of the only trees I know of that grows in a perfect straight line is a cypress tree. And whenever I go to Greece or go to the Mediterranean, we have them here in California too, and you look at a cypress tree, they pretty much grow straight up. There's nothing you can do there, so it's no big deal, right? But for the most of the times when I'm sketching, I'm going back to my little cheat sheet, asking myself these things, okay? And then the other thing that I talked about right here is I talked about simple shape. I talked about all branches, all leaves come back to simple shapes, okay? And then we resort back to some other type of simpler form before we go into draw it. Okay, all right? And let me see, what was I on? I was on slide 26 there. Okay, which is pretty cool. All right. Oh, I forgot. I was just going to mention one other thing. I'm sorry. So what happens when I'm talking here? Which is that number 6 there is a pretty common thing, but here's another golden thing. Gravity. Okay. Gravity. Okay. So when we look at a particular tree, and we're looking at that tree, so this is a great example with this nice curved tree here, is that you're going to have part of this, as that branch comes out there, do you see these little leaf ends, they're going to pull down and they're going to affect to gravity. Okay, this was huge for me because back in the day when I used to work as a 3D modeler, I remember having to model trees in organics. And I remember one thing that made my palm trees always look super awesome is depending on the gesture of my tree, I would go in and make sure that the flow of these leaves were going back because there is this force that is pulling down in this direction, which is gravity. So gravity is going to dictate how our trees and organics look. So what does that mean to me? If I'm working on a project that's supposed to be like Kepler's a sister planet they found that looks similar. I think it's Kepler 151 if I'm right, or something like that, or 87. So Kepler is supposed to be a sister planet, the same, what do you call it, the magic distance between our sun and the size of the planet, just, you know, the way we are to our sun. But the only difference is with Kepler is that Kepler is larger in size, so that means it might not have as much gravity. So what does that mean? That means organics or trees that grow from the ground, they're not going to have as much gravity pulling them down, so they're going to be able to grow upwards and make incredible looking canopies. So that's an extremely important thing to think about when it comes to drawing something, right? Right? That would be sort of common sense there, okay? All right, so let's go over here to take a look at a couple more of these. Okay, now, I took this picture here, and then I actually sketched this when I was looking at it. And what I wanted to talk about and point out to you is that sometimes when we're looking at a big grouping of pictures like this, so artists will look at this, and you're looking at this. You see the whole grouping right there, which is important, right? That's something to do with composition and composing. However, though, inside that, the one thing that's really important to me is, remember, every plant structure is different. So let me show you something that's happening over here that you might not notice right here. So when you go to draw this as an artist, you're going to start with the simple shape. Your simple shape is doing that. And if you pay attention to this, you'll notice the center is connecting into right there. So that you'll notice every one of them. If I come down to here, you see that? And then there's the center. So the center connects. So some plant lives, the connection is going to be in the back, okay? And that's not the case here. So in this particular plant, now here's the thing I'm going to point out to you that you might not notice, but this little teeny detail comes from knowing your subject matter and being to look at it and make your observation correctly. So let me show you. So we talked about right here where that stem support comes in there. So there's the stem underneath like that. But look at what this plant does. It goes this way and then it separates into a Y. Do you see that? So this right here is a separate grouping in itself. Then this is a separate grouping in itself. And then there's a lower segment from here all the way down right there. And then that becomes a separate grouping. So here, then you have a leaf there. And you'll notice, then it comes back in. You have a stem there. You have a stem here, 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 here. And then each one of these then gets a little bit different. So why is that important? Because if I go to draw this, I have to understand that there's really 1, 2, and then this down here is all 3. That all of this in here is one large grouping. Okay? that's huge. I know it starts to look like a football player. Let me see if I can go back a couple steps and erase some of this. Okay, you didn't notice that, but that's something, that's what comes from observation and paying attention. Look at that. Boom. That's key. Because whenever I go to draw that plant, and here's my little theory, right? If you draw organics or whatever you're drawing, you could show it to somebody who's not an artist and they can look at it and tell you if it's real. So I can do that with my wife, even though my wife has no artistic ability, pretty much. She's not artistically trained. She's a left-brain person. However, though, here's my Phil's little theory, right, of life, is that we have a natural little computer in our brain that not only understands visual shape language, but it also understands little things like when you're in threat or you're in danger, or if things look right or they don't look right. Inside that little computer, I believe, are these little DNA connectors that sort of show and demonstrate if something looks right in nature or in terms of patterns or in terms of scale. In fact, if you take that shape language that exists in pattern and scale and gradient and form, and if you apply that into all these different subject matter, plants, animals, everything, that's part of the makeup that makes us understand our environment, the things around us, if things are threatening, if they're dangerous, if they're fun, if they're happy, excited, whatever, right? That really is part of that, okay? So that's part of Phil's little theory, is that all of nature, all these things come back and they relate towards each other. We'll get to that in a minute, because at the end of my little demo here, I do have 2 samples that I need you guys to look at, okay? All right, that are really important, okay? 2 videos I want you to go out. 1 video and then 1 link to a website, okay? Sorry, I'm trying to talk and then play the next slide at the same time, and I'm getting all combobbled when I do that, okay? So here's another picture here. Wow, look at that. I wish you could see the full size of this tree here. So just imagine if you're standing here, look at how that root right there is almost like 6 to 8 feet tall. And look at how much this root comes down. And yeah, this is actually in Southern California, right? Pretty crazy. And then look at this cool grouping. So once again, this grouping right here that's above us, this grouping is the same type of grouping based off of this plant that was right here, right? So I know by looking at it, I know by looking at this that these plants are my Y-shaped plants. And look, you can even see it here. See it? Boom. And then I know, look at where the stem goes. The stem goes and connects in the middle. Look, there's the Y. So when you think about it, having that knowledge is going to give you the understanding to correctly draw all of those leaves, because before you go to do anything, you're going to come in here and you're going to sketch the stem coming up, and then you know that stem doesn't hit the end, so you know it hits somewhere, when in fact when you look at it, the distance from here to here, it actually weighs itself out sort of perfectly, where it's about, this is about 2/3 of the plant, this is about 1/4 of the plant, right? Well, that's huge. That's something that I can apply. So every time I do a sketch, I'm going to make sure that I have my plant comes up here. That's 2/3. It splits into the Y. There's the center. Then I can do the separate lines off of it. Then I come in and I do those little organics all in here. And then I do the other organics in here. And then this makes up one simple shape like that. It's a Y plant, okay? But that's important to me, right? That's why we talk about knowing your subject matter. Ask questions. What separates a pro or somebody that's really good at drawing and draftsmanship and designing from somebody who's not? This is it right here. Here's your answer. Okay? So I really like this plant too. Gosh, I wish I had more of an education in botany, because look at how nice this is. It grows from a center mass. One thing I've noticed about these plants is what's pretty cool, not only do they grow out and then grow from that center mass and radiate out, but as other ones grow, they sort of clump together, where you get 1, 2, or 3 of them, and then they become united and they keep growing out, where you have almost, again, like this protective canopy around the base that makes it really hard for bugs or herbivores or animals, whatever, people, hungry natives, whoever's going to go in there to eat that plant, right? But then you get to look at how much open the top of it is. So that's something I notice when I go to draw that. I want the top to be a little bit more open, because that's going to be gathering the sun. And then down here it becomes a mass of collecting overlap that's to protect it, okay? All right. All these little things make a difference. And, oh, sorry, same one. And then that was another picture of a root structure, which I thought was pretty fascinating. You know, little things like this. You know, I have more root structure photos, but I think what I liked about this is it had like these texturing. People probably walked over it too, but look at how the branches go and then blend in. There's like another branch that connects over there and tucks behind. It just looked pretty cool and had a nice alien feel to it. Maybe that's what caught my eye about it. I think being an Aliens fan and then a Geiger, who was the designer for Aliens, you know, he spent a lot of times to create this foreign world. One of the things he did as the production designer on that is he went out and took a look at a lot of organic shapes. And actually, when you look at lettuce, when you look at the branching structure inside lettuce, yes, lettuce has branching structure in it, right? And you look at that, that's when they made a lot of the interior wall shapes. And when they did some of the detail on like alien skin and other stuff, it comes from lettuce. Okay, so that's to me a pretty cool thing to know and something to think about, right? And then last but not least, I was sitting out there and they had this collection of turtles, and what sort of fascinated me was looking at the turtles grouped together and looking at what I was trying to do was count the turtles in a group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I was trying to see if there would be more dominant to have groupings with prime numbers. And then I was looking back here and I was trying to look at these lily pads here, seeing what their groups were and if they were grouping into primes and so on. So I do have a theory that, you know, something I've noticed with drawing and designing is that something I was taught from a couple mentors, Michael Spooner, Robert St. Pierre, and a couple other artists, is always design with prime numbers, okay? And then when you look at nature, you see nature using prime numbers quite a bit as well, okay? Anyway, so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to then go stop the recorder here and I'm going to draw for about another 30 minutes and I'll speed that up, okay? And then voice over it. So my whole point of this lecture is to talk about your subject matter, and then most importantly is to come in here and then I want to show you this, okay? So first off, here's a really great website right here. It's called Basic Biology, the Inspired by Life, right? And the link is basicbiology.net. And if you go through here, I really think this is a great, it talks about plant systems, it talks about stems, the difference between node and internodes, epidermis, talks about the vascular tissue of plants, you know, and it's just really cool because it talks about wood and bark, leaves, root structures. I mean, look, you click this section here and, well, it's supposed to load it. Hold on, there it goes. My kids are on the internet probably. And then look, it goes into leaves and it talks about leafing structure and broadleafs, talks about plants that have the difference. You know, you have two types of plants. You have broadleaf plants and then you have real thin leaf, like a pine tree, like needles. So the needles aren't nearly as susceptible to herbivores or certain bugs, but it works on a different system, needs more sunlight. So you're going to see their grouping and the way that pine trees create branch structures with group for photosynthesis is going to be a little bit different. So, I mean, I love stuff like this. This is, you know, I could look at this and I could learn about vein structure. I can learn a little bit more about the plant. So I just thought I'd share it with you. It's free. And especially this is really cool to me because part 3 of drawing organics is going to have to understand with pattern and variation of gradient structures, and that's something that's already been given to us by nature. We just aren't aware of it as human beings. So that'll be the part 3 of understanding organics. But here's a great little, oops, what happened there? Let me go back. I don't know what, did I jump off of it? Sorry. Here I was. Let's go back. We're on roots. Scroll back down here. Let's go to plant. There it is. Physiology. I hit a button on my mouse by accident. Sorry, and I dove off of it. So look at that. I mean, man. Okay. Xylem and phloem. Okay. And this is really cool when you start looking at how. So yeah, there's actually a vascular structure and there's patterns that exist on top of that, like that Y pattern I showed you, right? And this talks a little bit about this, about understanding the angiosperm in these tubes and how basically what we call, the liquid inside trees and how that works and flows. I mean, I don't know. To me, this stuff's fascinating. I know this is a drawing class, but again, the more I can look at some of this, and especially when I get into this, if you look at like, you know, part of the microstructure and you look at the mapping, all that relates to each other. It's part of nature. Okay, and in relationship to all this relating to each other, this is what I want to leave before I go and start drawing. This is the demo. This is what I want you guys to go watch. Okay, go onto YouTube, pull up The Shape of Things. This is a awesome documentary. Okay, this documentary, and it's up there for free, right? By Nova. This documentary was done to talk about the relationship and the similarities on our planet of understanding shapes and curves and lines on organics. And it's everything, because when you look, a lot, you got remember, there's a lot of things we take for granted. Looking at like our skin and the surface texture of our skin, we can't see it up close. But once you zoom in, you see pattern effects that are happening. So you have pattern effects in nature that are taking place at large scale, at small size, and that has a drastic effect on how things are designed. There's a similarity between us as humans, between our planet, between things being in a round shape, between cells, between rain, snowflakes, all these things. That's why this is such a bitchin' documentary. It's an hour long, but I promise you, and it's a little outdated. It's, you know, from the 70s or whatever. But if you watch this documentary here, and this really starts to get you to think about shape and part of the relationships and how all this stuff comes back together to make one sort of unified harmony structure that makes things happen. Okay, that's why it's so important. So watch that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this right now, and I'm going to start sketching for a little bit here. I'm going to pause the recorder to make sure I don't lose any of the recording, and I'm going to talk about a basic principle of just overlapping ribbon and bringing ribbon together for basic drawing fundamentals, to get you to understand a little bit more about how to properly draw shape. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a horizon line in this as well. Okay, so we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, guys. So what I did is I just, you know, saved the file there. Let's start talking about some drawing basics. Okay, so one of the first things I want to talk about that I've noticed with students, that's something that I learned, which is really, really helpful for applying into drawing plants, is this. I was really lucky to have some cool teachers back in the day, is understanding this effect right here. So this is not just a line, but you have to understand this. You have to be able to turn this into a ribbon like this. Okay? And then when you get this ribbon shape, you then have to be able to go like this, and you have to be able to draw through that ribbon. And then there are two things that are happening here. Number one is, as my ribbon gets back and recedes away because of the rules of perspective, this ribbon is going to start to get thinner. Okay? And then the other thing is that I'm doing that's of massive importance is that I'm drawing through my shape. Oops, sorry, I had a little bit of slip there. That I'm drawing through my shape as I'm taking my ribbon back. Okay? So this right here is a basics, you know, fundamentals of just shape. Okay? The next thing that I want to talk about or mention to you that will help you out is this, is another, you know, pre-basic of shape, is understanding what I would call, I was taught by good old Mr. Graber to understand melted pancakes. Okay? What melted pancakes were is when we would go like this, and we would just take an organic shape, and we would come, and then we would pretty much draw on top of that shape like this, where you understand that you now have a base part to it and a top part. So these both come in handy. The difference is the direction that we turn them. So when I go back to the melted pancakes here, one of the things that I learned when I was younger is that I could come in here and make a lot of different shapes like so. Okay, and I could start stacking them on top of each other like this. Okay. And what that does is it really has a sense of giving me, oops, sorry, I meant to get that little edge, and my eraser's so big. Let me make it a little bit smaller. So, hold on, now it's stuck on. All right, are we locked up here? Let me see if I can unlock. Sorry, this happens sometimes. The recorder's going at the same time that I'm drawing, and okay, I'm back. I just had to pause it. So what happens is the recorder is eating up all the RAM, and then it'll subtract some of the RAM away sometimes from the software, whether it's Photoshop or whatever. Okay, so see what I'm doing here, and then the next part of this. So number one, I'm dealing with ribbon. Number two, my melted pancakes, but I'm stacking my shapes on top of each other. The third thing, but I'm going to do this in a minute when we start to demo more, is when my pancakes start to come down on top of each other, there's going to be a point where I'm seeing underneath. So what does that mean? That means that my horizon line's about here. So when I'm drawing my shapes on top of each other, I have to be aware, and here's my basic principle. If I have a coffee cup and my coffee cup is sitting down here under my horizon line, I could see this part of the ellipse on my coffee cup. If I raise my coffee cup up above, okay, that horizon line, my coffee cup's going to be right here. I can now see underneath it, right? So that principle comes back, and that principle applies back in to when I start stacking these like melted pancakes on top of each other, right? So one thing I found that can help students sometimes is thinking about and drawing through what are these shapes underneath, and then what are they doing and how are they relating to each other, because it gets you to start thinking about these as being these different elements that are stacked together. And this is actually sometimes how trees grow. So I'm just showing this to you because if you ever get stuck in something, don't get stuck. Just think about melted pancakes. Everybody could draw melted pancakes, right? You just got to give them thickness. So the benefit of doing this now, what I'm doing there might be a little tedious to some of you, but for a lot of you, you've never been taught that before, or you've never been taught to think about structure in relationship to a horizon line. Okay, so now let's come over here. Let's go back to some basics about a plant, okay? So one of the things I just told you in the demo that I was doing was I told you to remember that you always need to break down a plant into the simplest form, hence this ribbon. So what I'm going to come over here is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start to draw out a plant. But before I do that, I'm going to do it with ribbon with no detail on the leaves of the plant, right? However, though, this is the one thing I need to remind you about, and this goes back to that thing that we just talked about here, having sort of like a horizon line or perspective, okay? So this is what happens. It ties into this ribbon effect, okay? Is that basically I need you to think about, and I'm going to do this as a square because some of you guys don't understand how to draw ellipses correctly. So if I think if I have a square like this, okay, inside this square, I could draw a line across, go this way, I can find the endpoints, and like this, and then I could come in and I can draw a base ellipse. It might be inside here, okay? So you can use the ellipse if you want. If you don't want to use the ellipse, that's fine to stick with a square like this, okay? Now, here's the golden thing that a lot of artists don't really think about. So if I draw a line up here, and if I draw these four corners up like this, okay? Now, that was my vanishing point. So when I come up to right here, let's say I'm going to crop this line and recede it back to my vanishing point. So I'm going to bring that line over to here, and then I'm going to come over here, bring that line back there where it hits. This is part of my basic shape, okay? You're like, why is he drawing a cube right now? This is why, okay? Because we talked about plants coming from a radiation point in the center, right? Right. So when I go to draw a plant, it's really important for me to think about I'm radiating out, but now I understand how to draw that plant going in that direction, that direction, that direction, and that direction. Does that make sense? That's what's really key about having to draw that square shape. Because what I notice that a lot of students do is they come into a drawing and they do this. So I'm going to come in here right now and I'm going to start to draw my simple ribbon folded over. No detail, just my ribbon, right? There's my dot, so there's part of my ribbon right there, okay? And then I'm going to make a ribbon up here. I'm going to make some different size ribbons that are a little bit smaller. Okay, I'll make some that are a little bit larger. so. Okay. Sorry, that's my daughter in the background goofing around. If that's super loud, it's not too loud. Okay, now, hold on a minute. Let me just get a couple more in here. So those are coming towards me, right? Look at the difference. And here's why I wanted to point this out. You have to be able to think about this when you're drawing. From that center, dot, 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 this end is going to end right there. Does that make sense? You have to think about that. You have to envision that in your head. And you have to feel it. If you can think about that when it comes to drawing an organic, that's really, really going to help you. So now that I did those, let me draw one that's going away from me, that's going, actually let's do one going sideways. So I'm going to come in here from about right here, and I'm going to draw a plant that's going sideways, a leaf. So I'm going to get a little bit of this leaf in here, like there, that's going sideways. So there's not much change in the depth of that shape because it's just going to the side. But then what happens if I draw this leaf larger, and my leaf is going back this way now? So again, I'm still drawing my ribbon, right? There's the top of my ribbon where it's going to start to curve. So now that's receding back behind me. So again, find that angle in there, dot that up, there. So that's that leaf there. So then I'm going to come back over here. Let's do that again. So if you break it down this way, you're actually doing a drawing that's a little bit correct because your little brain, your little computer, remember we talked about that little computer a couple minutes ago? It's looking at your drawings and it's figuring out what feels right or what isn't right. And that little computer of yours in your head is absolutely amazing because it can look at all kinds of things and it can just get a good sense whether or not something is feeling right or not. Okay? Okay, now I'm still doing the ribbon effect, but I just changed a little bit of the direction. So look, right here, I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to draw another one coming out here. But that's going to a side view. So coming from a side view, I'm really not going to see too much of that. Might be just a little bit of thickness on it. Sort of coming back to the plant, it's going to be somewhat thin. It might just sort of fit in there like that. Okay? And then let me throw another one or two in the back. All right, what if I even have one actually like right here? See that line in the middle? I'm going to split that up. Have one coming directly towards me. Okay, come back here. Let's have another one a little bit skinnier. So here's another little trick, right? By making the branch look skinnier, in perspective, that's going to make your ribbon look like it's further behind. Does that make sense? That's going to be pretty important to me. So what I did real quick is I created another layer. Now look at what happens when I take the box off. Okay, so when I was drawing this on purpose, I wanted to show you guys as the art students that, you know, to understand. Remember, this is a basic drawing for entertainment arts class I'm teaching, and everything I've been talking about is really understanding shape and form. Okay, and so again, shape and form is going to sorry, I lost my cursor. It's going to dictate that, look, that shape and form right there, folks. That's understanding that even when I'm drawing organics, my organics exist inside a simple shape. Okay, and that simple shape was a box. And part of that effect was my ribbon. Okay, but here, let me take that off, and then I'm going to keep working on my little tree grouping right here because I'm not done with it. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do as I go forward then here now is I'm going to go ahead and let me turn this layer back on really quick, okay? Because this time I'm going to come in here off that horizon line. Now, what I need to do really quick, erase the ribbon there, is some of you might not quite understand the horizon line point of view, but let me point it out to you why it's really important. Is because once I take off that box, I can see underneath parts of this image right here. So I can see underneath there. I can be able to see underneath that. Okay. Now here, I can see just barely on top of it because it's just slightly underneath my horizon line. You see that? So that's the type of thing that now this plant here, this leaf is just at a side view. So I just drew it a direct side view. So there's not really much thickness to it. And then look here, right here I can see slightly under that, okay? So that's really important because that's also going to help dictate whether or not you did your drawing correctly and if it's making sense, right? Right, so what I'm gonna do next now is let's come over here, let's take another basic shape. And remember, you don't have to be a perspective master or a guru with, you know, some of this information sometimes. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna come over and I'm just gonna start with like a real basic sort of elliptical shape here. Okay, so let me get something just really simple. And there, I'm going to come up to the side. I'm going to draw up going this way. Okay, and then when I get up to about, I don't want to make this plant too big. Let's go up to about right here. I'm going to come over and then let me get the other part of my lips. In here. There we go. Okay, so now that I have that done, and I'm going to come over here and look, I'm going to remember my center should be about there, and up here my center's about right there. Okay, so that's a good starting point for me again. So this time what I'm going to do is, and I'm not looking at any reference by the way, I'm going to go for a big leafy plant that has really thick leaves. Okay, so we're going to start from the center point, and then one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, I'm going to start with sort of my melted pancake structure. So remember how Phil did that melted pancake? We started with one sort of ellipse and I came up here, I put another base in there. Let's just say I put another ragged top and I put a little bit of line there. So I'm going to do this a little bit rough. Okay, and I'm going to not have much of a gesture, I'll do a little bit of a curve like that. Okay, so I'm just thinking about melted pancakes. There's it goes up a little bit more, coming up here, putting that segment in there. Maybe I come up here and I put another segment. That, another little segment. So now I can see underneath, like so. Okay, all right, so I got that part done, okay, and oops, so I have that in there. Now what I'm going to do is part of my shape, we talked about the ribbon last time. However, let me just try to simplify this. You know, hold on, let me go back to what I was going to say. So basically all I really did was this. I threw a gesture in, and I threw a body shape in, and then what I basically did is I put little cuts in it like that. You see that? We call that wrapping a shape with rubber bands. So by doing that, that helps that feel more real. However, though, sometimes I don't like this approach like that because I think it can look a little boring. That's why sometimes what I like to do is start with a gesture line, and then when I get in and I get these natural little melted pancakes and these cuts in here, they can feel a little bit more structured, and I haven't even started tilting them. I can have a little bit more fun with some of them right from the beginning. Okay, so let's talk about our leaf structure now. Our leaf structure is going to, we don't care if it's going to be thick or thin. This is basically the shape we want to start dealing with, is we want to have an ellipse, a squashed off ellipse, or you can think of this as a jelly bean, but we also want to make sure we have a center line going down part of our jelly bean, and then of course, what's going to happen is we're going to have some type of a stem. Our stem can come off the plant like that, or in a lot of times our stem is supporting the plant because it's a new leaf and it's growing outward like this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, now that we talked about that, you know, hold on, I shouldn't have erased it, because we've got to remember this. Sometimes I jump ahead too far and I need to explain it a little bit more simplified for students. So now that we have that, you have to know how to bend that now. So if you have to come in here and throw lines across this, and if you have to wrap it with form to get yourself to think about it, that's totally fine. So what I'm going to do to bend this now is I have to be able to think of, I'm not going to start with the stem. Stem's always last. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start to bend. I'm going to have that round shape in here. And as that round shape comes up and over, it's going to bend like this. That center line I'm going to draw through is going to come like this. This other edge is going to come through from down here, and then I'm going to have it bent like that. Okay, so if I take that and draw that, this is going to be the effect. Then I can come back in here and put the stem in here. Okay, So a huge part of what you're going to do now is taking something simple and being able to bend it. So let's even bend it into more complex. What if it's coming up this way and then it bends, then it comes towards us, and most of it's coming towards us? That's fine. So come down here, draw the shape. Now pick the angle. Things bend at different angles. Let's say this time it bends this way. Okay, so as it comes in here to bend, that's going to curve. That's going to curve this direction. Okay, you can even see where if you go draw through it, dot, 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 that's going to come up, sort of connect back into there. And then you realize, hey, look, my stem's a little off, because once I follow that center line and the center line comes down in here, my stem's going to be actually about there. Okay, all right. Good job. Now you've drawn the leaf, turned at another angle. Now let's take it a step further. What happens now if it comes and bends once and then again and then does that? So that's okay. So let's treat it like a ribbon. Let's do the principle of the ribbon first. We come across, right? Sorry, I'm running out of, I'm going to have to make this a thinner ribbon. This is going to come down, right? And then when it comes down, see that line here? I'm going to draw through the shape where that comes down there. That's going to come back up to the top of that ribbon, and then it's going to come down here, and then that ribbon's going to curve like that. So let me erase off the little ends right there. Okay, so let me end this right here. So I'm back to the same ribbon, even though it's an oval shape. So the only difference now is that this is where students tend to get really complicated, where they have this center line and they have this dot dot comes down there and they have that. The problem is that ribbon's one thickness, and what throws everybody is they need to taper it in. So as I come down here now, I could taper the end of that leaf in if I want like that, and then I can erase the outside. And then the opposite of that taper is going to be also to come back in and widen maybe part of the back side, but then remember I round it here. So where I come in here, I'm going to round that where it ends, like that. So I'm going to erase part of that in here. So now I know exactly where my stem's going to hook up, okay? And then I get to come back over, and if I want to widen this, all I have to do is pull this out about 1/4 of an inch, pull that out about 1/4 of an inch, which means that line's going to come up here. It's going to come in here and then round over here. It's going to start about there. It's going to come down and then go to there. So all I really have to do is then come in and lightly sort of erase, sorry, make this a little bit smaller, erase these other lines that are in here like that. And you see how I did that? I now have a leaf that is much thicker and it's bending. So again, you know, one of the things I find about, you know, trying to be a teacher or a better teacher is trying to break things down in their simplest formats for students to understand and to learn, right? Okay, so now that I have this, we've covered here. Now look at the difference. You know, we had number 1 here, which was simple. Number 2 was a bend going away from us. Number 3 here is a bend that is going coming towards us, and number 4, you know, we now have a multi-bend. Okay, so break it down into a way that makes it feel its best, where it's not superly duperly overcomplicated. And as you can tell, I'm not, well, you can't tell, I don't have my other monitor, I don't have any reference on it, I'm just drawing from my head. Okay, all right, so now that I have that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here now, and I'm going to start to draw some of my stems. Okay, so we talked about knowing your subject matter. When I look at palm trees, you'll notice that palm trees come up and they have a stem that's going to come off. That stem's going to bend, and that stem's going to come towards me. Now remember, I'm not going to get super complicated here, right? So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to draw my simple round shape. There it is. Now you'll notice this time I started with the stem. So that's okay. On another time here, I'm going to go the other way. It's not that I prefer one or the other, it just depends. Here I'm starting from the middle, so since I start from the middle, I'm radiating out in that direction. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here. This time I'm just going to imagine what I'm seeing. I'm looking at, imagining seeing a leaf like this, where I'm seeing slightly under the side of it, and I'm going to have a stem that's coming back into here, and then the stem's going to curve itself back in here like this, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to have another leaf there. All right, so let me just keep doing what I'm doing here. So let me say, now I know from already drawing lots of palm trees that some of the leaves at the bottom become very wide, and they're sort of in a way more protective. They create more shade for the tree. So as I get up towards the top here, and if I have something coming up this way that's brand new, it's going to be a lot more thin shaped like that, right? Because that's a new leaf. Remember, things grow from the center. That new leaf has not been growing a ton yet. Here, let me bring another one here. And this one's going to come to me. But this time, as it's coming to me, just because it's a little bit different, we're going to put a slight curve. Now, to me, in my opinion, that's too much of a curve, but it's all right. I can get away with it, right? There. Okay. All right. So now let's come down here. Let's do a big thick one. Now remember, one of the things I like about my melted pancakes is that this is also the old branching systems that used to be here, and some of these can be very thick. So like this one, I'm gonna, again, this is all my leaves right now for the most part are coming towards me if they're not slightly sideways, okay? So I'm imagining this guy coming this way, and when it gets over here, I want this, look at that, that's gonna be a really thick leaf in there. It's gonna be a lot larger because it's older, right? So I get that leaf in there, have that center line in there, and when I see that center line, look, it's going above my horizon line. Since it's above my horizon line, I can see slightly underneath that bend right there. That feels good, okay? Now, look at this leaf here. Do you see how it went dot, 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 and the center came, the leaf is going in that direction, right? So that's how I establish part of that direction as I come from that center, bring that line out. Now I'm wondering what were to happen if I were to just overlap that leaf. So this is coming a little bit naturally when I'm looking at that leaf. Yeah, it's probably about there. What if I have a leaf that's coming out more in this direction towards me, and it's another older leaf? So what I'm going to do is maybe this other older leaf starts about here. So in this case, I'm going to come down to the center, draw a line out, and then I'm just going to throw in the large leaf shape that I'm imagining in my brain. Because I want this shape, I'm seeing the shape overlapping the other leaf right here, like that. Okay, so I get it to be about there, right? And then I'm going to come back over here and start to get part of that center line that's coming through. And it's going to come down, let's say, to about there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is lightly and take the soft eraser here, and I'm going to sketch this down. I want it just very lightly so you can see how it's working, and then I want to, oops, let's go back to the hard, and then I'm going to overlap that completely. So remember, one of the key foundations of drawing, not of drawing, but I should say of composition, is overlap of shape. So look at my center, I bring that line down, that leaf is that high above the ground coming towards me. All right, cool, starts to work. All right, now that I've done a couple leaves that way, let me take some leaves and throw and have them go in the opposite direction, and let me get some more sideways leaves. Okay, so maybe right here, I'm going to have a structure that's going to come out. Now, if this goes sideways and just comes out like this, there's nothing wrong with that, but since it's way above my horizon line, I'm going to be able to see underneath it a little bit. So even if that leaf comes up here and bends and does that, I'm going to be able to see it ever so slightly just underneath, just a little bit like that. That's totally fine, right? Let me come in here. Let's throw, in fact, just for sake, what if we throw a branch that's coming in here and then it broke off? The leaf's not there. Trees do that too. That's one little things you'll notice is they come up and they break off and they go through these, or they get cut off, or someone pulls it off to burn it, right? They have these structures that are doing that. So now I'm going to make a leaf. It's going to come back here. Then I'm going to bend it back in the other direction, like this, behind there. But I know that's behind this leaf. Why? that leaf right there is on the side. Since that's on the side, this other leaf right here is going to fall down, and it's going to come over here. It's going to start to round. It's going to come back here, and it's going to go behind that. Okay, like this. So I'm looking at that curve. It's coming into the middle like this. Like that, okay? And it gets a little hard to see, but I can see it happening like this. So what I might do is put a couple lines on it to show that it's going away from me, type of thing. Okay? And then let's come back over here. Let's throw another one right in here. I want something right back in here. So here's where I'm going to start with the leaf shape itself. Leaf shape's going to be about there. There's the center line for that. It's going to come up here, and it's going to curve back into this. Like that. Like that, okay? And then come back over here. Now, I'm looking at the structure of these. You tend to get the visual shape language of it. There tends to be a larger grouping up on the top because that's where all the new ones are growing out. So the new ones that are coming out haven't quite split, so there tends to be a larger collection, and they're a lot thinner, or they're just starting to curl up a little bit. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to throw another line coming up here. And then maybe this one, just because I'm out of paper room here, I might come in here and just sort of curve that ellipse, but it's thinner. There's my center line right down the middle. That guy's going to come into there. And then let me see what else. Let me get one here coming out of a side view. Can see underneath it a little bit. That. And then we have another one that comes out here. That's going away from me. This is another sideways one, I'm thinking. Uh-oh, I already went into detail. Nope, Command Z. No detail, guys. Simple shapes. Keep it simple. Draw the lines on it if you want. That helps you to see it. Now maybe this one is coming a little bit more towards me. And then an early bend. Sorry, I get this weird curve there that's not quite working. And I just got to swoop in there and get the right angle on it, and then it curves a little bit like that. Okay? Like that. Now, let me turn off. Hold on. I'm debating if I should keep this part over here on the side, but this could be very helpful to somebody to look back at. All right, that didn't work. Hold on. 1 second, guys. I actually sort of like keeping that in there. It's going to keep the lecture down a little bit. Go to the scale tool. There we go. Okay, cool. So now I can come over and turn off that circle there. So do you see how that other palm tree here? You know what? Let me just move it just a teeny bit. Actually, move them both down just a little bit here. Just so they fit a little bit better into this face. Okay? Alright, so there's still a couple leaves. I'm looking at that. I could still add a couple more to overlap that a little bit. You know? But do you see how the overall consistency and the thickness of the leaf feels right? It does, right? There's visual weight to it. There's solidity to it. You can touch it. it makes sense that some are coming towards you, some are going away. So this is out of my head. Imagine now if I come back in and then I start, really getting the small intricate details of the plant back inside it. What I mean by that might be, some of these, they're just different trees. Some of them come down, and because of the weight, they have these sort of lines that go across, and then they split like this, where you get a split in the organic. Some of them come across, and then they're like this. They're every couple inches they break into a straight cross cut. Okay. There's another type that doesn't. When it breaks, they have rounded edges. So then they round off like this, and then they round again, and they round like this, and then they round like that. So there's all different types. That to me, that's all detail. That's all the next icing on the pass. On the next pass. Excuse me. What's important to me now is, does this feel accurate? One other thing I wanted to do, I want to put one going in here, double check my horizon line. Yeah, I thought I'm right on it. So I wanted to have one go up a little bit. Oops, wrong layer. So I wanted this, because you have these two big, this one and that one. I have two big leaf shapes, but I need a third to balance it out a little bit. So I just thinking having another, just, if that's sort of my center line. There we go, to something simple like that. Hard to draw through that. I can see where that is. Like that, okay? And then it has a little connector right here. And if I really wanted to, man, I still have room to put other leaves going in the back direction here, folding back. So there might be one that comes up here and lightly turns, and then it's just ever so thin. It's up here, but when that guy turns, it's coming back and going behind this. So it gets really busy there with lines, but I can put a couple lines on that to show that it's going back and the other way. Okay? So to me, that's looking pretty cool, right? It's making sense. Okay? So I think there is one more little part to this lecture that I want to add in. One more little suggestion that I want to give, because I have had a couple students was watching them and they were making some mistakes. So let me pause real quick the recorder. I'll come in and I'll add the last little segment that deals with understanding roots and how roots travel and how to draw those roots correctly. Okay, so let me just pause the recorder, because I don't want to lose 35 minutes of recording because I was greedy and didn't save it. Be right back. Okay, so I saved everything. Look, and I'm going to put this page up like this. I moved the other things down to the bottom. What I did is I showed you from basic shapes here, but then I wanted to do another curved shape going away, so you get the idea that it's not just simple turns, but we get into more complex by then countering those curves going to and from us, and also from a side view. Anyway, one more thing to cover. I know it's a long demo, but that's okay. So here's the other thing I need to cover. It's another mistake that I see with students drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I have a rock here, because I have these elements down below here. I'm going to pretend I have like a big rock, and and not just one, another rock down here. Okay, so. And then, hold on, let me get that rock fleshed out a little bit so it makes sense. Maybe it's part of another rock there. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to talk about, I need the rock as an anchoring point, because I don't want to draw into the leaves there, and I need to make this a little bit, zoom in to get this to fit. So what we need to talk about are the basics for understanding a tree stem, a tree root, or even the upper, well, stems are actually the upper branching structure as well. I mean, basically all plants are composed of three parts. They're either leaves, roots, and stems, right? So this is something, though, that I notice a lot of students screw up, so that's why I want to cover it real quick and see if I can aid you in a little bit in this. Okay, so here's the biggest issue, is that back to that box thing. You have to be able to think out here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer above this, and then I'm going to show you my thinking ahead of time. Boom. Here's my center. Okay? That's my ellipse down there. My center is going to go now up. I'm going to make a tree that's going to curve this way, let's say, because trees always have curves to them. Okay? But my tree's growing on or part of this rock system down below. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this and turn this back on while I'm working. But I need you guys to try to imagine this while I'm sketching it out. Okay, so first things first is you, hold on, let me turn off that layer. I want to mention this thing that happens with Maya really quick when you're using 3D, if any of you use 3D out there. So in 3D, this is the best way to think of drawing roots that I've ever found. And to me, this is one of the benefits of working in 3D, being a 2D traditional artist, is that you have this chance, you have this opportunity to do a extrusion along a path inside Maya. So what Maya allows you to do is this. Maya allows you to take a circle, like so, and it allows you to create a path, like this. So if you want to think of this path, you can think of this path in different ways. You can think of this path as maintaining its thickness, and then as it recedes away from you, it's like a ribbon, and then it gets thinner. That's fine. That's another way to do it, okay? In Maya, what you do, though, is you put down a line like this, and then you move the circle. And then you take the circle, and then you copy, duplicate it, and you move the circle again. And then you continue to move the circle, and you move it into the position, and then you can make the circle smaller and smaller. What it does is it extrudes this shape of the circle along that pathway, and then gets all these paths to intertwine with each other. And then that's how you make this cool branch structure inside Maya. Now, why am I telling you that? Because this isn't Maya, but this is drawing and draftsmanship. So the same principle applies to what we're doing. That if you can think of picking a line and you follow that line in the direction of it, and then you go in and you just make your circles go to smaller sizes, you have done half of the battle that is going to get you to build that organic. Okay, so this is how we are going to basically learn how to draw stems, or if you want to call it trunks, or you want to, and then also part of this is understanding the root systems. Okay, so this is how I'm going to do that. I'm going to come up here right now, and I started to sketch a line for where part of my tree is going to be. It's going to be like this, then I might curve part of my tree this way and this way. Okay, now I am thinking, even though I changed this, my horizon line's about right here. Okay, you'll also notice some of the other demos I've done before for students. I've always talked about the best way to draw organics is from the ground up. Don't start in the air and bring it down. It never looks right. Okay, you start from the ground. So technically, I started right here, which is the ground. This is me anchoring the tree to that rock. I don't know why I've been looking at all this reference of like cool trees in Vietnam and Thailand, and they like grow on rocks and all over, and the roots grow everywhere. So I'm going to pretend part of this is growing that way, okay, for this example. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back here. Remember this? See that center line that I have in there? So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to take what looks like a piece of yarn. I'm going to touch right here at the side of that tree, and I'm going to draw a circle. And I'm going to come over, and I'm going to drape my piece of yarn coming down off that rock, hitting that rock, coming up over that rock, dropping down, and then coming down here. As I do that, I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to draw my circle shape going the long part of this. And then as I get towards the end, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller and smaller. Okay? So this is how you draw a root system off of a tree, is you break it down into simple shapes. And as you can see here, I'm bringing this towards me, this system right here. Okay? So now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it on the side. So on the side, this time I'm going to make my root hole a little bit larger. And then I'm going to bring it down here, down to here, over the rock this way, and sideways. Okay? So there's one circle. I'm going to throw another one in here, here. And this time, just to be cool, maybe I might make it dip a little bit. So the root's going to go like this, drop down and get smaller, then come back up, and then come back down. Nature does this. Okay? All right. So that's the base of my root structure. Okay? Now, I have one coming towards me. What happens if I add one into the current extruded path that I've already drawn? So I'm going to come over here, draw a circle this way. I'm going to bring that root down to here, the ground, and then bring it over this way. So I'm basically extruding that. Now I'm going to go back in my brain. I'm going to think about how nature splits off into different. Nature it never stays consistent. So now I could bring a line that comes this way, and I might have another root that comes off here. That comes up, wraps up there. Okay, and then I look at this. That's connecting in there, and look, I can even see the center line mark of that major axis, and it's wrapping up over that. Okay, that's an important part of me drawing this correct. And then I come back over here, and I'm just going to do the same thing. Come down into there. I'm going to split it again. Gets down about right here. It needs an elbow break. Boom. And that elbow goes and hits another elbow or a knuckle, and then boom, and it goes again like this. So then I take my circles. There it is. And I connect those lines up. And as that one gets, it splits again. So it comes down into there. And maybe this one might go a little bit more and come this way a little bit like that. Okay, that way it feels a little different. It connects into right here. That connects into there. All right, so do you see the last thing I'm covering here is understanding this extrusion along a path, this principle that I learned in Maya, and I'm just applying it from a drawing standpoint. But when I'm doing it from my drawing standpoint, I'm thinking in the back of my mind about how I'm extruding from the center outward. So even right here, maybe there's another part right here. Maybe part of this is connected to that, and it's going to come down towards me, but then it splits. So a lot of times in nature, you can see branches that started as two. It comes down like this, comes towards me, and then I'm maybe just going to end it and have it deteriorate this way and go that way, and then have it come here and spread along that way. There, so I get it in. There. Okay, then I come back over to where that edge is hitting here. I get some of that, like so. Okay, maybe it even comes under there, just to be there. Okay, so that starts to work. Do you sense the tangibility in it? Do you sense the realness in part of that? Okay, so then as I come upward here with my tree, I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to do it with an upper, with an upper stem or branch to the tree. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do one down here that's going to be a little bit wider. I'm going to do one right here. So this one I'm going to make come a little bit more up and towards me. That's not really coming too much towards me. It's going more at a side. I didn't foreshorten that. So in foreshortening, to have something come towards me, it's going to have to be very drastic like this. It's going to look like a cylinder. So I prefer to draw the pathway of my tree like I'm extruding along a path. If you need to be able to, here I'm going to foreshorten this one. If that doesn't work and you don't do the path, then think of it as just coarse shapes. Boom, that's coming now towards me because that line, that's foreshortened from here to here. So I can just draw the coarse shape and draw a bunch of cones if I want to. And then when I get up to here, it starts to come a little bit more towards me. I'm just putting a couple of growth lines in there where the tree starts to turn or curve a little bit. I come over to here. We have a branch that grows off like this. Maybe it starts to come towards me a little bit more. Part of that branch. And then it comes and then dips and then splits, let's say. Okay, like that. Alright, cool. So there's my upper arm. That's one arm. Then I have another arm to then get in here and do. Okay. So I just wanted to cover this part at the end because to me, it's important to get this in here because this is the other major mistake I see when students are drawing trees is they're not really thoroughly understanding what these limbs are doing. Here I want to throw a big one coming off there, coming back down to the ground. I wrap a couple lines on that, come out here, and split that way like that. There, okay? So I'm just drawing out of my head right now, but do you see how it feels a little bit more realistic and the tree's starting to make sense? It feels like it's wrapping over and curve this one a little bit this way towards me since I'm running off the paper. There, okay? So I'm looking at that and that it feels like it's working, right? You know, let me get this, what am I gonna do with this one here? What if it comes towards me and then it goes away and foreshortens? Maybe it goes part this way. And then there's a whole nother, gosh, to get into real detail too, there's a whole nother study of branching systems, right? The way things split. I've noticed, I have this image, you know, let me see if I can find it real quick. Hold on. Let me see if I can add it in here. Anyway, I don't want to go hunting for it. Let me just finish what I'm drawing. ADHD kicking in there. What the branching systems I discovered is that you have T branching systems and Y branching systems, meaning that things grow like this and then they split into twos, and that's like the T, right? And then that comes off that and then it goes into another T, okay? So you get T systems. I was looking at some plants in a botany book and it was talking about this. A Y system is much more like this. And then the Y goes and the Y goes this way and the Y goes again. So you can see the difference. One is up and across and sort of symmetrical like this and keeps doing its thing like that. And then the other one is a little bit more organic or curved with the Y. So I think for some reason I never really thought of things as being a T, but I guess they can be. So actually on this upper branch here, let's draw it from behind the shape. So as my tree shape goes up like this, here, let me wrap it with a line so we can see the thickness of that shape in relationship to perspective. Here it goes down here, comes back this way, dot, dot, dot underneath, right? So after I wrap some of this in there, I'm thinking this other branch is like way back there on the other side. So that branch might come this way. So we have a hard edge here on that tree. But then the branch is going to come in here like this and then continue to go away from us and point away. And then go down and get smaller. So you got to remember, as I draw these branches back in here, this should be, that's going behind me. So let me go back to my, remember this? My lips. So let me draw it in red right here. You have to think of it like that's towards me. This is going behind the ellipse, so it's going away from me. Since it's going away from me, the scale should be shrinking. Part of the tree limb should be getting smaller, and it should be easier to determine that through your drawing and your sketch. You should see that happen instantly. It should be a lot more smaller, okay? Who knows, maybe right here you have a branch that was cut at some time or it blew off in the wind, you know? That's there. Okay, so then, I mean, this is more of a detail thing, but then what I do is sometimes I throw these little lines in. That's just me overlapping the shape, indication what's happening in terms of the shape and the form wrapping over, and that maybe this part here is a little bit thicker and it curves up, and then this wraps in here like so. Okay, so that's it. That's just looking at the structure, but still, you know, this is why, you know, and I'm not, man, there's this Killer Park by my house. I'd love to go there. They have some old trees there. But for me, when I'm looking at that, that feels pretty solid as a tree and it's working. So I'm just going to leave it alone. But you understand how I did that, you know, just, you know, going back to, because it's, man, I just, in my environment class, I have a couple students that are drawing trees in their foreground elements, which are great, but their trees sometimes just don't have the solidity, and they do this. They get a curve in there with a tree, and then they do a branch sideways. And I'm like, a root, excuse me, or the branch is just sideways too. And I'm like, no, it's all sideways. Attach that. Remember, you have to go back and think to yourself, that part of what you have here is a cylinder, and that cylinder is going up like this, and then as that cylinder has another cylinder that's sitting on top of it and it's connecting, you know, you have a circle shape that's on the front with an axis like this. Then if you go back here, you have a circle shape on the back like that. And you just have to think about that every time when you're drawing. You know, something too that helps me, if you cut through a circle like that and you put a line here, you think of that as being the one towards you, and you come in the back. And if you draw a line going this way and go dot, 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 you have, that's your shape on the back side of that tree. So this is what's going to establish and help your shape and form, is being able to, I mean, that's basically drawing through the shape and being able to cut through and see what's taking place. Okay? All right, guys, thanks for watching. I still have another demo that I have to get finished. I'm working on a third demo that deals with rendering and drawing when you're out sketching organics and trees. So I'm going to go work on that and try to get that done too. So anyway, take care, and thanks for watching. And talk to you soon. Keep on drawing. Keep on creating. Don't stop. Bye.